I'm standing in the lobby of the Pacific Breeze Resort right now, watching the sunset paint the ocean gold, and I still can't believe I almost lost all of this. Not to a natural disaster or bad business decisions, but to a man I loved, a man I married. A man who, along with his so-called son, tried to steal everything I'd spent 30 years building. The only reason I'm still here, still owner of this 47-room boutique resort on the California coast, is because when I married David Martinez at 65, I made one decision that saved everything. I never told him this place was mine. Let me back up. My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm 67 now. I bought this property in 1993 when I was 36 years old, newly divorced, and absolutely terrified. It wasn't the Pacific Breeze Resort back then. It was the Seafoam Motel, a rundown, 12-room disaster with water damage, a leaking roof, and a reputation for hourly rentals, if you know what I mean. I had $40,000 from my divorce settlement and a dream that everyone told me was crazy. My ex-husband said I'd be bankrupt within a year. My parents begged me to get a normal job. Even my best friend Linda asked if I was having some kind of breakdown. But I saw something in that decrepit building that nobody else did. Location, location, location. Right on the beach in Orange County, less than an hour from Los Angeles. The bones of the building were solid, even if everything else was falling apart. So I bought it. Then I spent the next 30 years of my life pouring everything I had into it. I learned plumbing because I couldn't afford a plumber. I learned electrical work because I had to. I waitressed at night to make payroll during the slow seasons. I slept in room 12 for the first 5 years because I couldn't afford an apartment and a mortgage. Slowly, room by room, I renovated. I added on. I upgraded. I built a reputation for personalized service, for attention to detail, for the kind of small luxury that made people want to come back year after year. By 2020, the Seafoam Motel had become the Pacific Breeze Resort. 47 rooms, a restaurant, a spa, and a waiting list for summer reservations. Travel magazines wrote about us. We had a 4.8-star rating online, and I had built it all myself. But there was one thing I didn't have: someone to share it with. My ex-husband had remarried within a year of our divorce and moved to Texas. My son, Marcus, was an engineer in Seattle with a family of his own. My daughter, Lisa, was a doctor in Boston. They visited when they could, but their lives were full and far away, and I was lonely. I didn't realize how lonely until the summer of 2022, when David Martinez checked into room 23 for a week-long stay. He was 62, charming in that quiet, confident way that doesn't need to announce itself. Silver hair, warm brown eyes, and this gentle smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. He told me he was recently retired, that he'd sold his consulting business and was traveling up the coast, taking his time, enjoying life. He complimented the resort without going overboard. He noticed details, the fresh flowers in the lobby, the way we remembered guests' names, the little chocolates on the pillows. He said it reminded him of the small hotels he'd stayed at in Portugal. On his third day, he invited me to dinner. I almost said no. I hadn't been on a date in 8 years. My last relationship had ended badly. A man who said he loved me but really loved the idea of never paying for anything again. I'd decided I was done, that running the resort was enough, that I didn't need the complication. But there was something about David, something easy and comfortable. So I said yes. Dinner turned into a walk on the beach. The walk turned into breakfast the next morning. By the end of his week, I was genuinely sad to see him go. He came back 2 weeks later, then a month later, then every 3 weeks like clockwork. He'd stay for 4 or 5 days, and we'd fall into this lovely routine. Morning coffee on the deck, evening walks, long conversations about everything and nothing. He told me about his life. Widowed 10 years ago, his wife had died of cancer. They'd never had children, something he regretted. He'd thrown himself into work to deal with the grief and had built a successful consulting firm helping small businesses with operations management. He'd sold it for, as he casually mentioned, enough to retire comfortably. He was interested in my life too, but in a sweet way. He'd ask about my day, about difficult guests, about the challenges of running a small resort. He never asked about money, never pried into the financials. He just seemed genuinely interested in me. After 6 months, he asked if he could extend his stays to a week or two at a time. "I'm not ready to move in," he said with a laugh, "but I'm not ready to leave either." I found myself looking forward to his visits more than anything else. The resort was successful, my kids were happy, but David made me feel something I hadn't felt in decades. He made me feel alive in a way that wasn't about work or accomplishment. He made me feel loved. 14 months after that first dinner, David proposed. We were on the beach at sunset, our beach, and he said, "Margaret, I know we're not kids anymore. I know this is unconventional, but I can't imagine spending whatever time I have left with anyone but you. Will you marry me?" I said yes, before I even realized I was going to. My kids had mixed reactions. Marcus was cautiously supportive. "If he makes you happy, Mom, I'm happy." Lisa was more skeptical. "You barely know him, Mom. Have you looked into his background? His finances? What if he's not who he says he is?" I bristled at that. "I'm 65 years old, Lisa, not some naive teenager. I can judge character." But her words planted a tiny seed of doubt that I tried to ignore. David wanted a simple wedding, which suited me fine. Just immediate family and a few close friends. We got married in April of 2023, right here at the resort, on the beach terrace with the ocean behind us. I'd told David from the beginning that I managed the Pacific Breeze. It was the truth, after all. I did manage it. I just didn't mention that I also owned it. When he asked about my income, I said I had a comfortable salary and some savings. Also true. I just didn't mention the property was valued at $8.2 million, or that I'd been drawing a modest salary to minimize taxes while letting the equity build. My lawyer, Patricia, had insisted on a prenuptial agreement. "Margaret, you've built something extraordinary here. Protect it." David had signed without even reading it carefully. "Of course," he'd said, "I'm not marrying you for your money. I have my own." The prenup stated clearly that all assets owned prior to marriage remained separate property. The resort was protected. So was my retirement account and my personal savings. The first month of marriage was blissful. David moved into my house, a 3-bedroom cottage about 2 miles from the resort. He was attentive and loving. He'd bring me coffee in bed, plan little surprise dates, tell me constantly how happy I made him. Then things started to shift. It was subtle at first. David started talking about my retirement. "You've been working so hard for so long," he'd say. "Don't you think it's time to step back? Travel with me? Actually enjoy life?" I'd laugh it off. "I love what I do, David. The resort is my life's work. I'm not ready to stop." He'd smile, but something in his eyes would flicker. "Of course, darling, whenever you're ready." Then his son appeared. I'd been surprised when David mentioned, casually, about a month after the wedding, that his son Paul would be visiting. "I thought you didn't have children," I said. "Oh, did I say that? I meant my wife and I never had children together. Paul is from a brief relationship before I met her. We're not close, but he reached out wanting to reconnect. I hope that's okay." It felt off, but I chalked it up to poor communication. Families are complicated. Paul Martinez arrived on a Thursday afternoon. He was 28, good-looking in a practiced way, with styled hair and expensive clothes that tried too hard to look casual. He hugged his father with that back-patting bro hug that felt performative. We had dinner at the house that night, and Paul couldn't stop asking questions. "So, Margaret, Dad says you run that resort down the road. That's impressive. How did you get into hotel management?" I gave him the brief version. "Started as an owner of a small motel, grew it over time." "Wow, owner? I thought Dad said you were the manager." "I am the manager," I said carefully. "The owner is rarely on site," which was technically true. The owner, me, was rarely off-site, but he didn't need to know that. Got it. And you've been managing it for, 30 years? They must pay you pretty well to stick around that long." David jumped in. "Paul, that's rude. We don't talk about other people's salaries." But Paul just smiled. Sorry. I'm in real estate development, so I'm always thinking about properties and numbers. Can't help it." The next morning, Paul showed up at the resort. I was at the front desk helping Maria check in a family when he walked into the lobby. "Hey, Margaret. Thought I'd check out your workplace. This place is beautiful." He wandered around like a tourist, but his eyes were assessing everything. The art on the walls, the furniture, the flow of guests. He stopped to chat with Maria, asking her about her job, how long she'd worked there, what the management was like. Then he came to my office. "Mind if I pop in for a second?" I did mind, but I couldn't say that. "Of course. What can I do for you?" He sat down uninvited. "I'm just so impressed by this place. Really professionally run. Can I ask, what's the occupancy rate usually run?" "That's proprietary information, Paul." "Oh, sure. I just mean generally. Like, are you guys usually full in summer?" "I bet you are. Premium location like this?" "We do well." "I bet. Property this size, this location, you're probably looking at, what, 3-4 million in gross revenue annually?" I felt my spine stiffen. "Paul, I'm not comfortable discussing the resort's finances with you." He held up his hands. No, totally get it. Sorry. Like I said, real estate brain. I can't turn it off." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, random question. Does the resort do any kind of staff ownership program? Like employee stock options or anything?" "No." "Huh. Interesting. So it's fully owned by an individual or a corporation?" "Paul, why are you asking these questions?" "Just curious." Making conversation. He stood up. "Anyway, I'll get out of your hair. Thanks for the tour." After he left, I sat at my desk feeling unsettled. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. That evening, David brought up retirement again. "Sweetheart, I've been thinking. You've been managing that resort for 3 decades. You must have a fantastic retirement package saved up. Have you thought about when you might want to cash it out?" "David, I don't have a retirement package from the resort. I have my own 401 cup in savings." "Oh, right. But there must be some kind of pension or profit sharing after 30 years? "No, it doesn't work that way." He seemed frustrated. "Well, how much do you have in your 401? I'm thinking we should look at our combined finances, make a plan for our future together." "We can talk about that," I said carefully. "But my retirement savings are separate property according to our prenup." Of course. I'm just thinking about us as a team." He smiled, but it felt forced. "We should meet with a financial advisor together, plan some trips, figure out our budget." I agreed vaguely, but I didn't commit to anything. Paul stayed for a week. During that time, he visited the resort 3 more times, always with an excuse. "Just wanted to grab coffee from your cafe," or taking a walk on the beach. But I'd see him chatting with staff, asking questions, looking around. One afternoon, I caught him in the business center, which was odd because it was primarily used by guests. When he saw me, he jumped slightly. "Oh, hey, just checking my email. Hope that's okay?" "Of course." But I made a mental note to change the admin passwords on those computers. The day before Paul left, he and David invited me to lunch. It felt like an ambush. They took me to a nice restaurant up the coast, and halfway through the meal, Paul launched into what was clearly a prepared speech. "Margaret, I want to apologize if I came on too strong about the resort. I'm just really excited that my dad found someone so accomplished. And actually, that's part of why I wanted to talk to both of you." He pulled out a folder. "I've been working on a real estate development deal in Arizona. Luxury retirement communities. It's a ground floor opportunity, and I'm looking for investors. The returns are projected at 18-20% annually." David leaned forward. "That does sound interesting." Paul nodded enthusiastically. "It is, and I'd love to have you both involved. Dad, I know you've been looking for something to do with your retirement funds to generate more income. And Margaret, I was thinking, if you were open to it, you might be able to leverage some of your retirement savings." "I'm not interested in risky investments," I said. "It's not risky. I have all the data here, the market research, the financial projections, everything. Look, I'm not asking for an answer today. Just think about it. How much do you have in your 401? Maybe we could start with a portion of that?" I put down my fork. "Paul, I'm not discussing my finances with you." David put his hand on mine. "Sweetheart, he's family. We're just talking. We're done talking about this." I stood up. I need to get back to the resort. The drive home was tense. David was quiet, his jaw tight. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something was very, very wrong. The next morning, after David left for his morning run, I did something I'd never done before. I looked through his belongings. In his desk drawer, under some papers, I found documents, bank statements showing an account with $3,847. Not $300,000 or $500,000 or whatever comfortable retirement meant, less than $4,000. Credit card statements showing maxed out cards, one for $15,000, another for $22,000, all with minimum payments overdue, and a letter from an attorney demanding payment on a judgment. Apparently, David owed a casino in Las Vegas $180,000. My hands were shaking. I took photos of everything with my phone, then put it all back exactly as I'd found it. I went to the resort and called Patricia, my lawyer, from my office with the door locked. I need you to hire a private investigator. Today, I need to know everything about David Martinez. Everything. Patricia didn't ask questions. I'll have someone by this afternoon. The investigator's name was Robert Chen, no relation despite sharing my last name. He was in his 50s, ex-FBI, with a calm demeanor that somehow made me feel less panicked. "Tell me everything that's made you suspicious," he said. I did. The questions about money, Paul's interest in the resort, the investment scheme, and what I'd found in David's desk. Robert nodded, taking notes. "How much does your husband know about your finances?" "He knows I manage the resort. He thinks I have a salary, some savings, a 401. He doesn't know I own the property." "Good. Keep it that way. How much does he think the resort is worth?" "I don't know. He's never asked directly." "What about the prenup? Did he read it?" "He signed it, but I don't think he read it carefully. It was pretty standard, just protecting premarital assets." Robert leaned back. "Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'll run a complete background check on David Martinez and Paul Martinez. Financial history, criminal history, past relationships, everything. Give me 3 days." Those 3 days were the longest of my life. I pretended everything was normal. I smiled at David, cooked dinner, watched TV with him in the evenings, but inside, I was screaming. Paul had left, but he called David constantly. I could hear them through the bedroom door, their voices low, but I caught fragments. "Just needs more time. Definitely has more than she's saying. I saw the guest log. Minimum $400 a night. She's been managing it for 30 years. She's gotta have." On the 3rd day, Robert called. "Can you come to my office? I'd rather show you this in person." I told David I had a meeting with vendors. He barely looked up from his phone. Robert's office was in a nondescript building in Costa Mesa. He had files spread across his desk. "Sit down, Margaret." I sat. David Martinez is not who he says he is. His real name is David Cortez. He changed it legally 5 years ago. My stomach dropped. Robert continued. "He's never owned a consulting business. He was a mid-level manager at a logistics company in San Diego. He was fired in 2018 for embezzlement. The company chose not to press charges because he agreed to repay $40,000, which he never did." He slid a photo across the desk. "This is Sarah Brennan. David, or David Cortez, dated her for 3 years. She owned a chain of dry cleaners in San Diego. Shortly after they got engaged in 2019, she discovered he'd opened credit cards in her name and maxed them out to pay his gambling debts. She pressed charges. He served 18 months in county jail." Another photo. "This is Jennifer Lopez, no relation to the famous one. She owned a small construction company. David dated her for 2 years after his release. She was smarter than Sarah. She kept her finances completely separate. When David proposed and started pressuring her to co-sign on a business loan, she got suspicious and hired an investigator. That was me, actually. When she confronted him with the evidence, he left in the middle of the night. I felt sick. Paul Martinez is actually Paul Cortez, David's nephew, not his son. He has 2 convictions for fraud, one for identity theft, one for running a fake investment scheme. He served 2 years in state prison and is currently on probation. Robert pulled out more documents. Here's where it gets interesting. I pulled the phone records. David and Paul have been in contact for 2 years, long before David met you. I also found some emails between them. They're careful, but not careful enough. They reference other projects that didn't work out. They refer to you as the resort job. He handed me printouts of email exchanges. "P, did you get the property info yet?" D, she's being cagey. Says she's just a manager, but I don't buy it. Place is too nice, runs too smooth. She's got a stake in it. P, find out how much. If she owns even 20%, that's over $1 million in equity. We can work with that. D, working on it. She signed a prenup but didn't read it carefully. Pretty standard asset protection stuff. Nothing about not commingling marital funds. If I can get her to pull from her 401k for the investment, it becomes marital property. Then in the divorce, I get half. A, smart. What if she owns the whole thing? Then we hit the jackpot. But we need her to either sell it or refinance it. That's where your real estate angle comes in. You convince her the market is hot. She should cash out. We invest the money. Then we disappear. I stopped reading. I thought I might throw up. There's more, Robert said gently. They've done this before. Sarah? The dry cleaner owner? They got $85,000 from her before she caught on. There was another woman between Sarah and Jennifer. Her name was Patricia Huang. She owned a small hotel in Riverside. They convinced her to sell it to fund an investment opportunity. She gave them $200,000. They were gone within a week. She lost everything and died by suicide 6 months later. Tears were streaming down my face. Margaret, you need to understand something. These men are professionals. This is what they do. They research targets, build relationships, exploit trust. They're good at it. The only reason you're sitting here right now instead of being their next victim is because you were smart enough to keep your assets private and smart enough to get suspicious when things felt off. I wiped my eyes. What do I do now? First, you call the FBI. This crosses state lines, involves multiple victims, and Paul is violating his probation by engaging in fraud. Second, you file for divorce immediately on the grounds of fraud. Third, you get a restraining order. Fourth, you change every lock, password, and security code you have. Will they go to prison? Yes. Between the evidence I have, what the FBI will find, and testimony from previous victims, they're looking at serious federal time. I called Patricia from Robert's office. Within 2 hours, we had divorce papers drafted, citing fraud in the inducement of marriage. Patricia filed them electronically that afternoon. The FBI agent I spoke with, Agent Maria Santos, took my statement and immediately opened an investigation. Mrs. Chen, you may have just saved other women from these men. Thank you for coming forward. I drove home in a daze. David was in the kitchen making dinner like nothing was wrong. Hey, sweetheart, I'm making pasta. How was your meeting? I put my purse down. David, we need to talk. He turned around, smiling. Sure, what's up? I know everything. I know about Sarah Brennan. I know about Jennifer Lopez and Patricia Huang. I know about your real name. I know about Paul's criminal record. I know about the plan to steal my resort. His face went completely blank, then twisted into something ugly. You've been snooping. You've been lying. He took a step toward me. Margaret, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're a con artist. You and your nephew target successful women, convince them to liquidate assets or take on debt, then disappear with the money. Patricia Huang killed herself because of you. His jaw clenched. That wasn't my fault. She was unstable. Get out of my house. This is my house too. We're married. Not for long. I filed for divorce 3 hours ago. The sheriff is on his way to serve you papers and a restraining order. His face went red. You can't do this. I already did. I'll take half of everything. That resort, your savings, all of it. I almost laughed. The resort isn't mine, remember? I'm just the manager. You said so yourself. And the prenup you signed without reading? It protects all premarital assets, which is everything I have. You get nothing. The realization hit him, and I watched his expression go from rage to calculation to panic. The FBI is already investigating you, I continued. Agent Santos is very interested in your activities. So is Paul's probation officer, who I called personally to inform him that Paul has been engaging in fraud. That violates his probation. He's probably being arrested right now. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. The sheriff's deputy with the restraining order. David left that night with nothing but the clothes on his back and the few things he'd brought when he moved in. Everything else stayed in my house. The next weeks were a blur. The FBI investigation moved quickly because I wasn't their first victim willing to talk. Sarah and Jennifer both came forward with additional testimony. They found 2 more women David and Paul had targeted who hadn't reported it out of embarrassment. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails, phone records, bank statements showing the flow of stolen money. Patricia Huang's family provided evidence for that case as well. David and Paul were arrested within 2 weeks. They were charged with wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and in Patricia's case, involuntary manslaughter since their actions directly led to her death. They both took plea deals to avoid trial. David got 12 years in federal prison. Paul got 15 because of his prior record and probation violation. My divorce was finalized 4 months after I filed. The marriage was annulled based on fraud. David got nothing because there was nothing for him to get. He never even knew I owned the resort until the FBI showed him copies of the deed during their investigation. I went to court for the sentencing. I wanted to look them both in the eye. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement, I stood up. Your Honor, I'm one of the lucky ones. I didn't lose my business. I didn't lose my savings. I didn't lose my home. But only because I was suspicious at the right moment and had the resources to investigate. These men are predators who specifically target successful women, particularly widows and divorcees, who are looking for companionship in their later years. They exploit our desire for connection, for love, for partnership. They're very good at it. If I hadn't kept my ownership of the resort private, if I hadn't had a prenup, if I hadn't gotten suspicious when I did, I would have lost everything I spent 30 years building. Patricia Huang did lose everything, and it cost her her life. These men need to be in prison for a very long time. The judge nodded solemnly and handed down the sentences. As they led David and Paul away in handcuffs, David looked back at me. There was no remorse in his eyes, only anger that he'd failed. That was 2 years ago. I'm 67 now, and I've learned a lot. I've learned that wanting love and companionship doesn't make you weak or foolish, but protecting yourself doesn't make you cynical or cold. Both things can be true at once. I've learned that prenuptial agreements aren't unromantic. They're practical. They're a sign that you're entering a partnership with clear eyes and a clear head. I've learned that background checks aren't paranoid. They're responsible. If someone has nothing to hide, they won't mind you checking. If they do mind, that's your answer. I've learned that red flags are red flags for a reason, and you should never ignore your gut when something feels wrong. Most importantly, I've learned that the life I built, this beautiful resort by the ocean, is mine because I worked for it. Every room, every detail, every success is the result of decades of my effort. And no one gets to take that from me because I was lonely or hopeful or human enough to want someone to share it with. I haven't dated since David. Maybe someday I will. Maybe I won't. I have my kids, who visit more often now. I have my friends. I have my work. I have this place that I love more than anything. And I have my freedom, which I almost lost because I trusted the wrong person. If you're reading this and you're in a similar situation, maybe you're thinking about remarrying later in life. Maybe you've met someone who seems too good to be true. Maybe you're feeling pressured about finances. Please protect yourself. Get a prenuptial agreement. Run a background check. Keep your assets separate, at least at first. Trust, but verify. It's not romantic, but neither is losing everything you've built. Love should feel safe. Partnership should feel equal. If someone truly loves you, they'll understand why you want to protect yourself. They'll want to protect you too. And if they don't, that's not love. That's something else entirely. I'm standing here in my resort, watching another sunset over the Pacific, and I'm grateful. Grateful that I listened to that small voice of doubt. Grateful for Patricia, my lawyer, who insisted on protection. Grateful for Robert, the investigator, who found the truth. Grateful for Agent Santos and the FBI who put these men away. But mostly, I'm grateful to myself for being smart enough, strong enough, and brave enough to walk away when I discovered the truth, even though I'd loved him, even though it hurt. Because at the end of the day, the only person who can truly protect you is yourself. And that's exactly what I did.